You know, there's something almost poetic about the fact that New Earth was the first episode to air after the Christmas invasion brought David Tennant properly into our lives as the Doctor. Here we were finally getting to see what this new incarnation could do, what adventures awaited us in this brave new world of post-regeneration storytelling. And yet, watching it back now, I can't help but feel like we were handed a gift-wrapped present that turned out to be, well, mostly empty packaging. Don't get me wrong, there are moments of absolute brilliance scattered throughout this episode, particularly when Tennant and Piper get to stretch their acting muscles in ways that we'd never seen before. But as somebody who spends their days wrestling with scripts and story structure, I've got to say that New Earth represents one of the most frustrating examples of missed opportunities in the entire Davis era. It's an episode that had everything it needed to be truly special, and yet somehow it managed to trip over its own ambitions at almost every turn. So settle in, because we're about to dissect what should have been a triumphant return to form, but instead became a masterclass on how good ideas can be undermined by sloppy execution, as we go beyond the sofa. The fundamental problem with this episode isn't its ambition. Russell T Davies deserves credit for wanting to expand the show's universe, for giving us our first glimpse of what the far future might look like in this new iteration of Doctor Who. The problem is in the execution, in the way that promising concepts are introduced and then immediately abandoned in favour of plot convenience and rushed pacing. Let's start with the setting itself. New Earth, 5 billion years in the future, humanity's new home after the destruction of their original planet. It's a concept that should feel momentous. It should carry real emotional weight. This is humanity's second chance, their opportunity to build something better from the ashes of what they've lost. And yet, the episode treats this monumental backdrop as little more than window dressing. We get a few establishing shots of New York, some throwaway lines about the planet's history, and then we're whisked away into the hospital where the real plot begins. We're invited to a grand feast, but we only actually get served a single appetizer. The Sisters of Plenitude themselves represents another missed opportunity. Here, we've got a religious order dedicated to healing, cat-like beings who've devoted their lives to medicine and compassion. On paper, it's a fascinating concept that could have explored themes of faith, sacrifice, the nature of healing itself. Instead, they're reduced to sort of one-dimensional villains whose motivations are never properly explored. Why did they turn to these horrific experiments? You know, what drove them to abandon such principles? We're never really given a satisfactory answer because the script is too busy rushing towards its next plot point to pause and examine the moral complexity of the situation. And then there's the matter of the human farm itself, the idea of growing humans specifically to harvest their diseases. It's genuinely disturbing, the kind of bodily horror concept that could have anchored a truly memorable episode. But the execution, again, is rushed, it's superficial. It never really achieves the impact that it should. We see rows of diseased humans. We're told that they're suffering, but we never really feel the weight of that suffering because the script doesn't give us time to process it. It's kind of horror without the horror. It's tragedy without any emotional resonance. But here's where things get interesting, and where we start to see glimpses of what the episode could have been. The moment Cassandra possesses Rose, everything changes. Suddenly, we're not watching a generic sci-fi adventure about medical ethics gone wrong. We're watching two of the finest actors in the show's history getting to play completely different characters, and it's absolutely electric. Billie Piper's performance as Cassandra in Rose's body is nothing short of extraordinary. Watch her in those early scenes after the possession, the way that she holds herself differently, the subtle changes in her vocal patterns, the way that she examines Rose's body with a mixture of fascination and disgust. It's a masterclass in physical acting, and it shows just how much range Piper had and that the show rarely allowed her to display. when she's flirting with the doctor, when she's reveling in having a young body again, when she's experiencing physical sensations she'd forgotten, every moment rings true because Piper commits completely to the performance. And then there's David Tennant's turn as a Cassandra-possessed doctor. If Piper's performance is a masterclass in subtlety, then Tennant is a masterclass in, well, I suppose you could call it controlled chaos. He captures Cassandra's vanity, her self-absorption, her desperate need for attention, but he does it through the Doctor's physicality and mannerisms. The way that he poses, the way he examines himself in reflective surfaces, the sheer joy he takes in having a pretty body, it's comedy gold. But it's also character work of the highest order. These aren't actors putting on funny voices. They're inhabiting completely different characters while still maintaining the essence of the people that we know and love. The sequence where they're both possessed, where they're working together but inhabiting different bodies, and the lift shaft sequence, that should have been, almost an emotional and comedic heart of the entire episode. For those brief shining moments, it is the chemistry between Tennant and Piper, already strong in their normal roles, becomes something entirely different when they're playing these characters. There's a playfulness, a sense of discovery that makes you wish that the entire episode had been built around this concept. But here's the tragedy of New Earth. Just as these performers are hitting their stride, just as we're settling into this fantastic dynamic, the script yanks us back to the main plot. Cassandra's possession becomes another obstacle to overcome rather than the central driving force of the story. It's like watching a short film, which is really well done, but then it's suddenly interrupted by a television program. The resolution of Cassandra's story is perhaps the most frustrating element of all. Here we have a character who's been established as a villain, selfish, utterly without redeeming qualities, and suddenly she's given a moment of genuine pathos and redemption. The scene where she possesses her lackey, for want of a better word, and then she tells herself that she's beautiful, it should be deeply moving, and it is, thanks to the performances involved. But it feels kind of unearned because we haven't done the character work necessary to make that redemption feel genuine. This is what I mean when I talk about missed storytelling opportunities. Imagine if the entire episode had been structured around Cassandra's journey from villain to somebody deserving of our sympathy. Imagine if we'd spent the time exploring her past, understanding what drove her to become the last human in the first place, and what fears and insecurities led her to her obsession with physical beauty. Imagine if her possession of Rose and the Doctor had been used not just for comedic effect, but as a way for her to experience a genuine human connection for the first time in centuries. Instead, we get a plot that's more interested in its medical mystery than its characters, more concerned with the moving pieces that are going around the board than in exploring the emotional implications of its concepts. The diseased humans are cured not through any meaningful character growth or moral reckoning, but through a literal deus ex machina involving the Doctor's medical knowledge and some conveniently placed healing patches. The pacing issues that plague the episode are symptomatic of a larger problem in the Davis era, the tendency to cram too many ideas into a single 45-minute episode without giving any of them real room to breathe. New Earth wants to be a story about medical ethics, a comedy about body swapping, a character study about Cassandra, and a showcase for the new Doctor. And it does it all at the same time, or at least it tries to. Any one of those elements could have anchored a strong episode, but trying to do all of them simultaneously means that none of them really get the attention that they deserve. The medical ethics plot in particular feels half-baked. The moral questions raised by the sisters' experiments, questions about the value of individual life versus greater good, about the ethics of medical experimentation, about what we're willing to sacrifice in the name of healing, they're introduced and then they are immediately abandoned. There is no real debate. There is no moment where the characters are forced to grapple with difficult choices. The sisters are simply revealed to be the villains, and that's an end to it. Even the world building, which should have been one of the episode's strengths, feels a little bit rushed and superficial. New York looks impressive in establishing shots, but we never really get a sense of how this society actually functions. Who governs the world? How do the various species interact? What challenges does humanity face in rebuilding their civilization? These questions are the foundation upon which any meaningful story should be built. But this episode, well, it does get some things right, because there are moments of genuine brilliance scattered throughout. The production design is genuinely impressive, creating a world that feels both futuristic and lived in. The makeup, the prosthetics, the work on the cat people is excellent. Creating characters that feel alien, but they don't feel ridiculous. And the central performances, particularly from Tennant and Piper, during the possession sequences, I know I keep coming back on that, but seriously, they are strong enough to carry the episode through its weaker moments. The episode also deserves credit for its ambition. This is only the second episode of Tennant's era, and it's already trying to expand the show's mythology in significant ways. The idea of following humanity to their new home, of showing us what they've become in the far future, is exactly the kind of big picture thinking that Doctor Who does best. The execution might be flawed, but the vision is sound. There is something to be said for the episode's optimism. In an era where science fiction often defaults to dystopian futures and moral ambiguity, New Earth presents us with a world where healing is possible, where redemption is achievable, where even the most seemingly irredeemable character can find peace. It's a fundamentally hopeful vision of the future, and and you know what? Hope is one of Doctor Who's greatest strengths. Looking back at New Earth, now, 20 years later, it feels like a missed opportunity of epic proportions. It's an episode that should have been a triumphant statement of intent of the Tennant era, a bold declaration that this new Doctor was ready to take us to places that we'd never been before. Instead, it's a frustrating reminder that good ideas aren't enough on their own. You need the storytelling discipline to execute them properly. But perhaps that's too harsh. Perhaps New Earth deserves credit simply for trying, for being ambitious enough to fail interestingly, rather than succeed boringly. There's something to be said for an episode that swings even if it doesn't quite connect. And those moments when, it does work, they're genuinely special. And in the end, New Earth is an episode that I want to love more than I actually do. It's an episode that shows us glimpses of brilliance while simultaneously demonstrating how easy those glimpses can be squandered. It's an episode that had everything it needed to be a classic, and yet somehow managed to be merely adequate. And maybe that's the most frustrating thing of all. Not that it's bad, but it's so tantalizingly close to being great. Those performances from Tennant and Piper during the possession sequences alone are worth the price of admission. And they serve as a reminder of just how much untapped potential the show had and continues to have to this day. So what did you think of New Earth? Did those sequences make up for the episode's structural problems? Did the missed opportunities leave you feeling frustrated? Let me know in the comments below, because I would love to hear your thoughts on what I think could have been one of the great episodes of season 2. And instead, it was just a bit of an also-ran. Until next time, keep watching the skies, keep questioning the stories that you're told, and remember, there's always something waiting in the shadows, something that might just be lurking beyond the sofa.